I mean, Singapore is quite unique, and certainly in Asia, it's a city-state, so it's a tiny population. If you look at the population of Singapore, it's 5.4 million people, but living in 700 square kilometres. So that's like the entire population of Scotland living in half the size of Fife. Singapore is now the world's third largest financial centre and the largest in Asia, overtaking Hong Kong a couple of years ago. It's also got the second busiest port in the world and has become that strategic hub for companies looking to do business across both Southeast Asia and Asia as a whole. Back 200 years ago, when Singapore was first founded, one of the first governors of Singapore was Scottish, and those connections have been kind of continuing to this day with a really strong cluster of Scottish companies. So Singapore is a hub for the region's oil and gas industry, so there's a lot of Scottish companies using Singapore to access opportunities in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and now more and more going into new emerging markets like Myanmar and Vietnam as well. Singapore is actually the fifth largest market globally for Scotland's food and drink. Such a tiny population, but around £270 million worth of Scottish food and drink exports goes to Singapore. So last year, food exports to Singapore grew by 30% and seafood exports doubled. So we're really pleased to see the demand for premium Scottish products within the Singapore market. So Singapore is the gateway into Southeast Asia, or ASEAN, as we call it, the Association of Southeast Asia Nations, which is 10 countries with a population of around 600 million people. So that's bigger than the US market, it's bigger than the EU market. We've got companies like Skyscanner, for example, which was established in Singapore back in 2012 and has then used Singapore as that hub to open up new premises and new presence in China, in Japan and in Australia. We also have big food and drink companies, so the whisky players like William Grant and Sons and the Edrington Group, again using Singapore as their Asia hub and their Asia HQ. I actually don't think the distance is that much of a barrier for Singapore, and I don't think there's very many barriers for exporting to Singapore. I think Singapore should be seen as Asia for beginners. It's a much easier place to do business, so it's topped the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index for the past 7 years and was only overtaken by New Zealand last year. It also scores very highly in the Global Competitiveness Index and also the Corruption Index, much more so than any other Asia country. The other thing that Singapore offers is that English is one of its 4 official languages and all business is done in English. So that's a real added benefit for UK companies and Scottish companies looking to do business. The support that we can offer Scottish companies to export to Singapore really depends on the sector. So we can help connect them with partners and distributors in market. We can do market research and gathering insights. We also have a soft landing area in our Singapore office where companies can come in and use a hot desk for up to 3 months to help them establish a presence. We'll then also work with that company to introduce them to banks, to accountants, to lawyers, and helping them through that full stage of the setup process.